Let's hope we never have to get to that point, mighty Zorhulash. Plus, doing what Lortrazin says, torturing a Catan to obtain more abilities? Is that really necessary? I asked in a meeker tone, and then located my daughter on the Ejida, talking to a sister. So they weren't all muted? Perhaps that woman hadn't taken the vow of tranquility yet. Most likely so. Made sense to keep a few voice-able sisters around, if communicating with other people was needed. A few other sisters had voxcams attached to their Vritine armor, so they possibly could use tech lingua or other forms of mechanical transmission. Their armor looked amazing, even had boob plates. But, it wasn't air-sealed, and that wasn't so great. Gonna have to fix that. With a twist of the Pharos, I arrived in the same room, to the surprise of the pariah women, who should have nullified any psycho spell or ability. Hello Janice. So these are your big sisters? They don't look so big. I wondered in a doubtful voice. Daddy. This sister is Alana. She can still talk, because she is only a novice. I could be a novice too, right? My daughter asked in a dimpled smile. No, resist with all your strength, Pef. Don't let your daughter get stolen in some creepy cult. We shall see, sweetie. First you need to learn the navigator skills, and then we can work on these other forms of magic, I said instead, not willing to break her heart just yet. Plus, some of these women seemed battle-hardened and quite capable. More than me, anyway. You are Lord Lancefire? I thought you were a blank, not another miracle like Janice. Sister Alana asked me with a concerned voice. I just shrugged carelessly. I certainly am a blank. I fought Chaos Sorcerers before, even killed a traitor Primarch once. But most importantly, I am a rogue trader. I answered and opened my null box to remove my warrant scroll. Better make sure they knew what I was, before knowing me better. So I offered the warrant to the sister in charge. Please read it, my dear. Especially the part about my duty, beyond the borders of the Imperium. The Witch Seeker took the scroll a bit confused and started reading. While reading, her free hand flashed in battlespeak, which was quite similar to what Ludvius had taught me. I sighed and slammed my bone staff on the metal floor. We can also talk mind to mind. It will become easier when we know each other better. I spoke to all of them empathically. It was very difficult though, even with the aid of my enslaver staff. Pariah were a different breed, that was certain. The armored women blinked in confusion, then stared from me to Janice and back. More miracles today, no doubt. A minute later, the leader of this squad handed me the warrant, looking thoughtful. The Inquisitor told me your group is interested in joining me and my clan, setting up a blank community in the Fringe. Was she wrong? I asked in a gentler voice. The leader stared into my eyes and nodded, a bit hesitant. You look more like an Astartes than a rogue trader, Pef Lancefire. I have seen both, during my duties. The sister replied in my mind. Good enough, for now. You and Alana, join me as we deal with the Elder. Name? I asked as I turned for the door and began walking away. I am Sister Hastia. The Null Maiden answered in my mind, as she began walking after me. Can I come too, Dad? I want to explore the Eldership too. Janice asked in a pleading voice. You can't, sweetie. It is a war zone, and Eldar are treacherous. You don't even have a Rosarius. I explained gently and patted my belt. Damn it. What if I ride Canis? She yelled after me. No means no. I spoke harshly in her mind, leaning on my staff for extra power. The girl pouted and went to hug the nearest sister, who seemed rather confused. Sister Alia, teach me that sword move again, Janice demanded in a childish voice. The sound of an execution blade scraping the metal floor announced how my daughter could get away with outrageous things even from other people, not just her parents, or their wolf pet. The Ejida was a rather big fortress, and it still bore the marks of combat and fire. Tech priests and tech marines worked side by side with serfs and servitors to repair the damage, while a couple of Inquisition acolytes watched over them trying to look scary. I ignored the obvious killers and torturers, and stared at a blonde woman with a dozen Mechonicus implants and lots of gear that would better suit an infiltrator, or perhaps an assassin. So I stopped next to her, to observe the repairs. Hello there. You fought in the siege? I asked with a tiny tendril of humor. The blonde woman patted her needle rifle, and smiled back. A single Eldar assault boat made it into the hangar, Lord Lancefire, and it was over very fast. I thought you'd be taller, from all the stories I heard. I'm still growing, my dear. I expect I'll get much taller, in a century or two. I answered in a fake whisper, and walked on. Modest too, she muttered while staring at my armored ass. Holding my helmet sensor towards the back always made for best comebacks. You think she is marking my ass for a needle shot? I asked the non-mute Alana, who blushed and glanced at the sniper acolyte in surprise. Perhaps not for a needle, my lord, Alana mumbled in a stammer. How cute. She might become my favorite in bed soon. We will take the Talion, Sister Hestia announced me with another mind message, while pointing at an armored lander with a few special weapons on its wings. Looked a lot like the Death Watch deep strike gunships, the Corvus_Black Star. Looks very advanced. I like it. I complimented the ship and Alana smiled widely at me. We have nice gear, from Mars and Luna. I am learning to pilot as well, she explained while the Null Maiden climbed in the cockpit and took off like a veteran pilot. Hestia most certainly knew her job, or she wouldn't be leading this team, far behind enemy lines. So, what do you do with the blank boys, when they get born? Drown them? I asked to make conversation. There were only women in this sisterhood, and I already knew blank boys would get born. I had quite a few myself. Alana blinked at me in confusion, then towards the cockpit. I heard rumors, they get taken to Holy Terror. But I don't think they just drown them. They probably grind their bones to make psych-out grenades or something, I answered with grim smile. The novice sister glared at me like I said something untrue. You think they make Negasai bolts from dead blanks or pariah? She asked a bit terrified. I nodded with certitude. Completely certain, Sister Alana. Of course, they might die during battles or something. It's not like anyone would hate untouchables so much that they would simply murder them to collect the organic parts, right? I asked rhetorically, as the Talion lander entered the launch bay of the Eldar Void Stalker. I've never heard of blank men fighting in battles, Alana confessed with a horrified face. All the more reason not to enter the Imperium again. I liked my bones and organs where they were. A few minutes later, I was escorted on the battleship's bridge, where a tall and lithe Eldar female was kept under guard by my blood angels. On the way, I wondered at the very advanced and clean battleship, which looked more like white and grey plastic. Compared to the smoky, oily and rather grim human ships, this Eldar vessel was a real wonder. Farseer? I inquired politely. You have joined forces with that abomination from beyond the stars, human. The Eldar yelled at me, while shrinking from the pariah aura of my pretty escorts. Not sure what your point is, Farseer. You will offer and I will accept your surrender, or else execute you and all your followers. 1 solar minute to think it over, I explained while deliberately checking the corrupted bolter rounds magazine, and loading it inside the unceasing service bolter pistol. Her eyes grew wide with terror, as the psychic emanation from those bolts announced an eternity of torture at slange-loving tentacles. You cannot do this. Our souls would be damned forever, she yelled and tried some psychic gestures, which were rather futile with those pariahs beside me. I hummed, pretending to consider her words. Humanity has the Emperor and the Omnissiah. Right here on my chest, the twin-headed Aquila. I indicated tapping the sigil. Orcs have their Gork and Mork, both ready to accept their orcish spirits after they die. What gods do the Dari have? Right, nearly all of you suicided to create one, not so long ago. Surely your new god will await you with open arms, right? I continued with fake naivety. The Farseer seemed rather reluctant to meet her god. My rose snorted like I said a good joke. How strange. She didn't fear death, until you arrived, Lord Lancefire. Your rhetoric might be lacking, but it surely seems to work anyway. I smiled widely, and cocked the bolter as a warning. I didn't hear a yes, Farseer. 2 solar seconds, 1. Yes. We surrender, damn monkey. The Eldar proclaimed, and her honor guard slumped in defeat. Hestia, gather their potent psyches and transport them to the fortress. Alana, sing something nice, I commanded with a grin. Better get my Alana used to having a voice. I won't let her lose it. A clear voice began singing praise to some long-forgotten saint. But I didn't mind, and just enjoyed my victory moment. Once the battleship was brought under control, with not too many shots fired, to everyone's surprise, I returned to the Aegid Inquisitorial Fortress. Another flick of Tesseract powers concluded my victory, as I confiscated all the damaged hulls remaining, including Orc and Eldar derelicts from the previous invasions. I will need those hulls for my Forge friends. For now, Suta will have to fend for itself, with the aid of the Scythe battle barges and strike cruisers, plus the ring of orbital forts. Of course, my Rose will continue interrogating the prisoners, and await her designated Catan expert to handle the imprisoned Shard. I was highly doubtful on the guy's chances of success, but it wasn't exactly my problem. Over the next 3 weeks, I continued using the Pharos to collect intelligence for my next objectives, especially around Badab and the Maelstrom underscore zone. Without the important Hell Forge, Chaos forces in that area were substantially weakened, and that allowed the Imperial Navy and local Astartes chapters to conduct more and more deep strike missions in and around the Warp Vortex. Also, as soon as my mental faculties recovered, I would launch new Exterminatus-grade torpedoes at strategically important targets, places like Gorka Morka, which needed eliminating, as a potential outbreak source for a huge War or a Necron awakening danger. The Orcs burned alive, their crashed space hulk melted into torrents of adamantium and plasteel, and the melted magma sealed the Necron tombs even tighter. They should not get bothered again for a long time. Well, unless someone begins mining the place, which would be great too. Forge Megaia was the closest, so perhaps my clan could get a favor or two by revealing a few gigatons of adamantium, ready to be grabbed. Since the Necron world of Simona got invaded and got rather well chewed up by Hive Fleet Kraken, I followed up with another atmospheric incendiary warhead, melting and eliminating the bugs and preparing that place to become a mining world for more Blackstone. I would take a year or two, but Forge Metallica was nearby. They could handle hot lava. However, the next incendiary attack on the Necron crown world of Sarlocc was somehow deflected by a dampening field, producing minimal effects, so I decided to wait for the Tyranids to reach it and demolish those defenses first. The demon world of Vencress was next, just next door in the Hadex anomaly, and then demon world Torvandis in the Maelstrom. Still using only incendiary torpedoes, because they were 100 times cheaper and more readily available. Cyclonic torpedoes would be reserved for Class 1 dangers, like Hellforges or Black Crusades. And then the other Inquisitor arrived, high and mighty and full of airs, broadcasting threats and warnings from the edge of the Suthas system, like he owned the place. Well, he kinda did now that I made an Inquisition fortress out of Sutha. There were still 5 cyclonic and 34 incendiary torpedoes waiting inside the Pharos, so I warped them in my other tesseract, where I kept the good things. 2 more vortex torpedoes were returned to their own battle barges, as were their melter torpedoes. No need to weaken the ability of the barges to defeat another big invasion. And so, I ordered my Astartes and Silent Sisters into their assault landers, then they vanished in the void, and inside the good labyrinth. Continuing the emergency evacuation, I loaded the Pharos's sounding board on its transport tractor and then folded it inside the dimensional tesseract with care. Then I tried using the Pharos, and the empathic console seemed unaffected by the dimensional differential, which made sense a little, and no sense at all. Damn Necron tech was more advanced than magic. My new Catan friend was given a few life-saving instructions, which he will probably ignore out of boredom and pride. A minute later, I stepped out of the Pharos and right into my fabricator's office on Forge World Retribution, hundreds of light years away. The guy had been my bridge officer for a few decades, so I could trust him for some things. A second later, my followers and their shuttles emerged in Retribution's orbit, released from the Tesseract, and I ordered them to secure the battleships and await orders. Sometimes, access to very advanced tech meant I could cheat the odds and gain time. That's how Trazyn must feel all the time, with the ability to bend time and dimensions at his will. The conveyors and the canticle had not arrived yet, although they departed from Sutha weeks ago. "Fabricator, I believe you found the STC presence," I asked as a dozen tentacles turned towards me holding deadly weapons. "By the Omnissiah. Don't scare me like that, Captain Pef. I almost fried you." Margus Dominus muttered and splattered me with holy machine oil. I felt like home again. This time, however, the oil evaporated with a sizzle on my shield. I glanced at his metal tentacle with arcing current, still tapping my Rosarius conversion shield. I am real, my friend. No need to banish me like a demon. I quipped and blinked a bit surprised. Wasn't expecting such electrifying welcome. Sorry about that, Captain. There have been some strange occurrences on that Apocalypse-class battleship. Voices haunting people, servitors strangling themselves, Dominus mumbled, as he drew his crackling mechadendrite back sheepishly. And thus, you immediately installed a dozen Geller fields, to impose reality on the haunted ship? I asked wryly. The tech priest blinked in confusion, then waved his tentacles while spouting orders, in Benharican techno-lingua. The cogitator screen came alive with thousands of lines of code and construction routines, some reasonable, others quite irrational. Then again, such was all the Mechanicus, and the Imperium was much worse. Reason was almost forgotten. Only faith and fury. Another red-robed Margus entered like he owned the place, with an Antax symbol on his cog. Dominus. Why so many Geller? Oh. Captain Lancefire. I am Fabricator Locumi Rider No. 119. He introduced himself politely, and without trying to burn me alive. Progress. Go on with your duties, fabricators. I'll be around inspecting my new forge world, I said politely and walked out, nearly breaking my face into Brother's Delos' chest plate. Delos, well met brother. Where is Brother Cassiel? I asked while patting the man's shoulder in greeting. For a psycho, this guy was quite decent. Didn't even flinch at my blank aura. Reciting the canticle, like you have ordered, my lord. It seems to work great, and the rage is almost conquered. Delos explained, and then grinned warmly. He even seemed happy to see me again. And, you have not departed for Baal. For what reason? I asked in slight worry. Astartes wouldn't disregard orders easily, so whatever it was bad. I considered prudent to not expose Brother Cassiel to more stress. Being lost in time for 10 millennia was a great shock, plus whatever he endured in his captivity. I also detected some kind of alien implants, inserted in his brain. The chaplain told me softly, with a few fingers signaling Xen origin confirmed. In Astartes' battlespeak. All right, someone did things to him during these millennia, and thus you immediately contacted the fabricator to have these strange implants removed, right? I asked rhetorically. The chaplain changed faces a few times, settling on shame and defeat. I haven't considered that, my lord. The Mechanicus, they are heathens and worship the machine god. I tapped my chest again. See these two eagle heads, my friend? The Emperor and the Forge, united in a single body on Mount Olympus. Your armor is made by Forge and Caladian, right? The chaplain stared at his black-painted pauldron, and nodded in understanding. So, are you saying we should trust the tech priests? I shook my head. You should not trust anyone, by default. Only by word, deed and intent. One day, when humanity will be made only of blanks, and travels the stars without entering warp, then it will be different. But until then, always be cautious and ready to shoot. Especially Inquisitors and Adeptus Ministorum priests. Power drives people mad, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It was the same on Old Terra, and now is 1,000,000 times worse. Delos muttered a prayer and seemed to meditate on my words. Absolute power, like all Inquisitors have as agents of the throne, he concluded with a scowl. Soon enough, we reached an emperor's chapel where the ancient blood angel was praying, while staring at some grotesque icons of beasts and spears and lots of blood. They surely helped calm his fears, I hoped. What is death? I shouted, using my empowered vox box. It is our duty. The Astartes answered in a chorus. What is your duty? I continued the chant. To serve the Emperor's will, came the accepted answer. What is the Emperor's will? I asked curious. That we fight and die, they proclaimed with perfect conviction. And who tells you who to fight? I wondered, breaking their protocol. Both blood angels turned towards me in confusion. We go where we are called, Lord Lancefire. Chaplain Delos answered after a few tense seconds. And who calls? I inquired in a softer voice, pointing at the bloody icons. The Emperor. Brother Cassiel exclaimed like it was obvious. Of course, all Astartes will obey the Emperor. But Emperor Adam of the Imperium of Man is not quite healthy these days. Other people give orders in his name. Sometimes, they order Astartes to do evil things, and yet they obey. I mused to myself, while opening the null box to extract my rosette in the warrant. The engrams immediately subdued the brainwashed Astartes, who just stared at me like I was a divine messenger. Brother Cassiel, do you recognize the authority of these artifacts? I asked gently. Of course, my lord. A rosette means the bearer is an agent of the throne. The warrant of trade marks you as a rogue trader, speaking with the Emperor's voice, outside the Imperium. The displaced space marine declared without any hesitation. What about you, Chaplain Delos? I asked with a wry voice. To his credit, the Psyker Astartes fought through the mind-addling engrams to retrieve his bolter and shoot me in the chest. The bolt vanished in a flare of white light. You are not corrupted, Lord Lancefire. I had to check, Delar said in apology. Good. Always check. You are Astartes, the best of humanity. The next time I see any of you obey orders without checking, I will shoot you. Is that clear, Astartes Cassiel? I asked the new addition to my team. Things have really gotten so bad in the future? The stunned Blood Angel murmured in surprise. 1,000,000 times worse, lost Astartes. Now, report to the biologist's ward and have those xeno implants removed. 2 curses are sufficient for any chapter, we don't need a third to act up at some inopportune moment, I demanded in an angry voice, while storing the precious items back in the null box. Another bolt around splashed the Rosarius shield, right in the direction of my armored pauldron. Nothing personal, my lord. Only following orders, Cassiel said in a more relaxed tone. Keep that smile, Astartes. I hear the tech priests enjoy testing pain resistance of their medical subjects. Always trying to prove the flesh is weak. I muttered as I sat down to clear my thoughts. I had a campaign to plan, and a whole load of logistics to complete. Ruling an interstellar empire wasn't so easy. My eyes fall on a litany written with golden words on a flag, most certainly Chaplain's work. Where there is uncertainty, I shall bring light. Where there is doubt, I shall sow faith. Where there is shame, I shall point atonement. Where there is rage, I shall show its course. My word in the soul shall be as my bolter in the field. Nothing about reason or facts. Nothing about discovery or joy. We might as well be orcs, they too have only faith and fury, after all. It even works, there was bending reality as they rage and plunder and destroy. Fighting each other, the orcs become stronger, and then they attack others. It is what a branch of Inquisition fosters, the so-called Isvaanian. They encourage cults and rebellions, they poison leaders and create disasters, causing untold suffering and pain. Only men are not orcs. There are more than enough enemies, xenos and demons plaguing humanity. And these cretins create strife and misery instead of helping the Imperium. And like them, there are so many other cliques and covenants of inquisitors and tech priests and nobles and administrators, all fighting for more power, at the expense of the people they were supposed to protect. I swear, if any inquisitors show up in my own kingdom, they will not live to attempt these kinds of machinations. And then, there is the problem of the imported tech priests from Styges_8, a forge world widely known for heretic inventions and breaking many taboos imposed by the strict laws of the Imperium. Sure, a host of free-thinking tech priests will be amazingly useful and productive, until they unleash some gene-tailoring virus or data inficide or other clever invention that ruins an entire sector. I will have to speak with them about this, and likely execute 1,000 of them, just to make a point. Luckily, I do have a starting base already, and active support from 4 Jantax. The rescued Katakan regiments, from Trazin's own collection, and the women I saved from Suta will become the basis of my gene stock, with more and more blank genes injected from my descendants and their descendants. The hive cities are rather useless in this respect, even after vaccination campaigns and the culling of the underhives, but they will provide cannon fodder for servitors and organic parts for new machine spirits. An hour later, Fabricatory Ryden sent me a vox call, to make myself available in the Medicaid ward. I am by now quite familiar with these type of Mechonicus medical wards, for some reason. Soon, I enter the biologic ward to find Astartes Cassiel mostly dissected and disassembled, skull open while the Necron scarabs were being extracted with surgical precision, then conserved in glass jars. Not even lids on those jars. Damn common sense, biologist Clade. 5 Magi biologists and the fabricator Locum all nodded me in silence. This is very advanced xenotechnology, Lord Lancefire. Someone has kept the subject under mechanically induced mind control, with no discernible ill effects. Copying and reversing the nanofilaments will take centuries at least. The Magus explains in a slightly excited voice. I see. And if these filaments were composed of nanites, and escaped from those open jars? I asked curious, pointing at their abysmal work security protocols. No wonder the Mechonicus keeps bombing labs from orbit to stop failed experiments. The Magi wave their metal tentacles in panic, and soon find some glass lids for the jars. They look at me like kids caught playing with scorpions, and not yet understanding the risks. Next time, use a sterile warded glass operating box, with remote instruments. And have an incinerator prepared to shove that box in, if demons or metallic limbs sprout from your subject. You can follow a simple contagion protocol, being the smart and logical people that you certainly are, correct? I mused out loud, reconsidering my projections and adding a few centuries to my plans, for the inevitable catastrophic lack of common sense of the Mechonicus. You are a beacon of reason, Lord Peth. What else could we do for better security? The fabricator asks, and keeps picking scarabs with his tools, and dropping them in another jar. A Geller field over each forge section and spire, force field containment barriers and melter warheads buried underneath each lab. Also, datasphere firewalls and regular Promethean firewalls. Blackstone armor inside and out for each lab, and 1 million warships in orbit, just in case we need a rapid exterminatus for the whole planet. I continue with a gentle smile. Isn't this a little exaggerated? One Magus wonders while picking a Necron scarab and keeping it weighted close to his bionic eye. That is the minimum necessary, my dear Magus. If that Necron scarab activates suddenly, then turns and enters your eye, you could unleash a lethal virus and kill everyone on this planet in a minute. Meanwhile, your body will slowly transform into necrodermis and you'll become a Xeno. And then I will have to kill you, and burn the planet with exterminatus. Wouldn't that be just great? I asked in dismay and turn around to leave. We will begin implementing the minimal security protocols, Lord Lancefire. Do you want us to harvest and clone some black carapace, for your next power armor? The fabricator asks, slicing off some of Cassiel's dermal organ and holding in midair. I think for a moment and approve it. Archeo's armor would become much easier to control that way. And best power armor for my Sisters of Silence as well. Air-sealed, Auspex visor and spinal black carapace, with trauma packs in the pauldrons and 3 logic shields, each based on refractor, conversion and flare templates. Plus 7 and transceiver brain implants, I demanded before I exited the medical lab. Having my own forge was providing some boons too, not just headaches. Brother Delos awaited outside the lab, looking worried. Will Brother Cassiel be fine? They wouldn't let me inside. Damn tech priests. The chaplain complained in an offended voice. That's because they let me inside the ward, but not him. Envy. Such a human emotion. He's perfectly fine. My biologists Magi are the best in the entire Eastern Fringe, I said in a relaxed voice. It was sadly even true, because they were the only such Magi in the Eastern Fringe. I will pray he makes a fast recovery. I also sent a warning astropath communicator Lord Commander Dante about that sorcerer, my lord. Just in time it seems. He explained in a worried voice. Oh? That happened? Tell me. I asked a bit amused, while heading for the aircraft factory. Sadly, it was much too close to the certainly doomed biology lab. Orbital cleansing would burn my planes as well. We were lucky some of your blank sons were inside the gene seed reliquary. They managed to subdue the infiltrator, with only minor injuries. Delos announced and patted my shoulder in praise. In a few minutes we entered the assembly lines, where servitors and low-level tech priests and engineers worked on mass-producing my new army. Pretty much every force in the galaxy had too few airplanes, which would prove my advantage. The advanced starfighters, even the scary Hell_Blade made in the Eye of Terror, were produced in too small numbers. The same was true for the Imperium or the Eldar, and only the Orcs had cheap airplanes. The enemy would have 100 or 1,000 starfighters, I would have 1,000,000 cheap fighters. Quite possibly at the same total cost. Damn space fighters were really expensive. Sadly, losses would be high, due to laser weapons that took milliseconds to hit a target. Perhaps the new cheaper shields, gifted by my friendly Necron wizard, could be produced in the needed numbers. We shall see. The inspection took a whole week, from planes to tanks and small arms factories, to visiting the Katakans and convincing them of their new role as guardians of the fringe, and of the defenseless women who fled the destruction of their home world. I even promised them 10,000 thrones prize for every 10 kids, and 40,000 thrones for reaching 40 kids, which wasn't a usual gratification for a simple guardsman, even a renowned Katakan. Somehow, the trip gained me plenty of goodwill, and 100 old-era Katakan concubines willing to bind themselves to me and my clan. We'll have to thank Trazyn for his good taste, and the pleasant warm nights he gifted me. From the sisters, only Alana was eager to taste my body yet, but I was certain the rest will follow one day. It wasn't like they have many choices in men. Kinda hard to get close to anyone else when you were a pariah. A few months later, sisters Hestia and Aaliyah did in fact give in to my charms and friendly demeanor and argued they might get a new Janus from our holy union. I was hoping the same thing, of course. More medical tests and sample collection followed, fresh eggs and seeds sent to Antax for more and better blank machine spirits. And then, the conveyors and the canticle arrived, with their own new problems. I gathered all the Stygies high priests in the great hall of the Mechonicus Forge, flanked by my Astartes and Silent Sisters bodyguards. Welcome to Forge Retribution, all of you. Now, before you get working on all those STC templates and damaged battleships, I will make things clear. You are not to conduct personal research. That's a capital crime in the Lancefire domains. Secondly, while the rules will be a bit laxer, you will not attempt experiments on my people. No viruses or infomorphs or other Mass Effect devices. You will not work on warp technologies of any kind. Xeno research will be conducted in sealed labs on the outer moons, with melter bombs planted onto those labs. You will follow quarantine protocols, and stay under Geller fields at all times. I want to hear, yes, Lord Lancefire. Grumbling Magi of all Clades looked around for support. Perhaps they did want to experiment freely, outside the Imperium. This is not what we were promised, Lord Lancefire. We have brought many forges and servitors and rare artifacts with us, just to escape the oppression of the Imperium. A tall-robed cyborg argued, and many tech priests around him supported him with voices or gestures. The focus of my forge will be warpless technologies. Real spaceship engines, better reactors, mind-to-mind stellar range transmission, better personal weapons, better shields, cheap aircraft, cheap power armor and blank machine spirits. That's for starters. Later we will begin assembling reality cages around my worlds, to prevent any warp emissions from interfering with civilization, from warp storms to aqua fields or tyrannid silence. I don't really care about other types of projects, nor will I fund them. Everyone who agrees, bow down and take a pledge, I shouted as hard I could. From about 3,000 tech priests, less than half agreed. Good enough, I muttered, while flicking my left glove with a shiny crystal on the backhand. The recalcitrant magi vanished in my tesseract, leaving only the more pliable ones. I was certain I could trade them, for something of value. I am certain we will have a great future together. Welcome to Retribution, I announced while passing among my new tech priests while they looked around a bit stunned. Another miracle, my lord, Chaplain Delos said while watching me with glowing eyes. I could only sigh, and hope it would be enough. With the increased number of tech priests, and their extra forges and servitors, completing the first orbital dock took only a few months, and we began manufacturing the new Necron-based reactor and ship drive, using the new and fake STC patterns we have discovered aboard the derelict battleship. We called them Macarius pattern, because that guy was now a saint and thus less likely to arouse too much suspicion. Brother Cossiel was reassembled successfully by the strangely effective biologist Magi, without the Necron mind control scarabs, and expedited to his homeworld of Baal to donate his knowledge and gene seed to his weakened chapter. Meanwhile, Forge Antax worked hard to upgrade our Bane blades to the Doomhammer pattern with twin magma lances and atomantic reactors, and converting the Lehman Rust tanks to Volcano Lance variants. It took much less time and resources than building a new super heavy war machine, and with flare shields the Doomhammers would be twice as durable now. Our destroyers have all finished converting to the Los Angeles class, with 30 torpedoes in a vertical cell, and the corvettes followed the upgrading queue right now with a 20 torpedoes cell, because they were smaller. The Litany and the Hymnal, as well as the Dominator-class cruiser and the new Mercury-class battlecruiser will take much too long to upgrade, and so they remained in factory specifications, only adding the improved auguries and a lot more point defense weapons. As for myself, between coordinating construction and making babies, I worked with the two fabricators on the Nova shells we had, trying to modify the schematic for a Nova mine. For all our efforts, the best we could achieve was something akin to a slow torpedo, sheathed in layers of ceramite and asteroid rock. Wasn't ideal, but I did have my Tesseract to deploy them in advantageous locations. For other people and our local defense, they would be much less effective. And then, the first transport of Blackstone from Mandragora arrived right on time, and we could really start upgrading most of our installations and ships with warp-resistant armor. Only 10-centimeter thick plates of Blackstone, because we had a lot to cover. Necron ships were made entirely out of this stuff, and were amazingly durable, but we were thieves and scavengers and had to ration our resources. We did have enough adamantium to cover the battleships in 10-meter thick armor layers, and we will probably do that, once we had strong enough reactors to allow those ships to still move. One mass conveyor was sent to Forge Riser, containing a few new STC templates, a melted adamantium hull recovered from that space hulk, plus enough Blackstone for thousands of power armor plates and a dozen Eldar derelicts from the siege of Suta, and even an intact Eldar cruiser, without prisoners. I was sure the fabricator will appreciate the gift and start upgrading the conveyor into the fleet carrier I had envisioned. I even found an ancient STC template of an Odysseus-class-war-galley retrofitted for carrier operations, both parasite-type system ships and starfighters, plus torpedo cells and landing bays for troop transports. The new carrier had 10 Geller fields, and 4 void shields, because it would carry a valuable fleet inside. Another Universe-class conveyor departed for Triplex FAL, though without Blackstone, because they were mining from Mandragora right now. Mostly adamantium-made hulls and Eldar derelicts. In exchange, I requested one more Nova cannon-armed cruiser and another armored regiment, because I did have many kids in need of a good ship. And if the same fleet carrier could be converted from the conveyor hull, even better. My blank daughter Andrea was still a cadet pilot, but she boarded the conveyor to return as a cruiser captain. It would take years till she returned, so she had enough time to finish her command courses. She also had an Astartes bodyguard in 2 companies of Katakans, if she eventually wanted big strong kids with razor-sharp reflexes. The frigates were recalled to Retribution to receive our first locally made conversion into missile frigates, with 40 torpedoes ready to launch and 40 missile launchers each. They did have a heavy lance and 40 las cannon and 40-point defense multi-laser batteries as well, but that was mostly for moral support. I wasn't planning to fight anyone at that close range, but better to have them than not. Next year, we were ready for the Warpless engine's first test run, using the Big Orc Terror ship as a test bed. Our last conveyor was still being prepared, its hull split open to allow the next engine to be installed. But only if it worked. Nobody expected the Orc derelict to survive, not even myself. That poor hull had suffered so much under the Orc disrepair, and then after getting bombed and boarded by my troops, that everyone expected it to fall apart in mid-trip or something. Instead, the tech priest in command and his servitors made it to Alivar and back in 3 weeks, without entering the warp. Twice as slow as a good warp current could take you, and 100 times better than the worst currents. And most of all, it was reliable. The Geller fields only kept minor ghosts and echoes away, without the constant assault by demons or enslavers. Possibly 1,000 times slower than the Eldar or Necron could travel, but this was only the first flight. Starfighters could fly 1,000 times faster than the first aircrafts, and in time we will have faster spaceships. This called for a big celebration, and the Silent Sisters agreed unanimously. The ship kitchens provided foodstuff and drinks for a dozen people, my cogitator provided non-stop victory hymns, and we got to taste all. In fact, we locked ourselves in my canticle apartment and came out a week later, very drained but very satisfied. I was pretty sure both Attarine_Hestia and Tanau_Alia got pregnant during the celebration party, while Alana was months pregnant already. She did get to taste me first, after all. The troops on the ground were being ordered to muster for war, those of them in rotation for deployment. We wouldn't leave the forge defenseless, because that's how bad things happened. The conveyor soon received the new engine, and a fleet of 1,000 system-only corvettes was loaded from Antax, in exchange for the first Warplus ship. And so, we departed for Badab, just in time to intervene in the worst massacres. The Canticle and the Mercury stayed behind, because they formed the backbone of our domain defenses now. Instead, we had 20 Los Angeles destroyers and 3 cruisers as escorts for the Icarus fleet carrier, which carried inside enough ships and troops to win a small war. For example, it carried 5 Katakan regiments, all mechanized and armored. My own troops were not bound by the regulations of Astra Militarum, which allowed only a handful of sentinels per regiment. I could have 1,000 walkers, and I did. And mine had arms too. I could have 1,000 laser weasels and 500 multi-laser hydras and 100 missile manticores and 50 Lance Lehman Russ tanks and 20 Doomhammers per regiment. And I did. A normal Cadian armored regiment has 30 Lehman Russ tanks, 1 Baneblade and only 5 hydras. And no air support. Makes you wonder how they still stand. I had 40,000 drones and ground attack fighters, and 4,000 interceptors. Not all that much yet, but they were homemade. Training 4,000 of my Katakans to become fighter pilots continued during the trip, which required lots of 70 implants and math lessons, besides simulations and cadet lessons. Luckily I did have a cadre of cadets and officers to do all the training for me. Of the Silent Sisters, 1 of each was deployed in the cruiser's Geller generatoriums, to keep warp accidents at a minimum, just like they did on the Inquisition's black ships. We emerged at Badab in the middle of an Astartes vs Mechonicus fight, Navy and Mechonicus ships under attack by the Astral_Claws, having gone traitor due to their chapter master having fallen to chaos, and the idiots following orders without thinking. Destroyers, support loyal Navy and the Mechonicus vessels. Cruisers, free to hand the Astral_Claws strike cruisers. Icarus, launch the fleet. Navy and Mechonicus ships, this rogue trader Pef Lancefire with private fleet support. We will move to intercept the traitors. I announced on the Vox channel, just as a few Carthagan trade vessels began taking heavy fire from Fury starfighters and strike cruisers of the Astral_Claws. The Mechonicus ships had Forge Riser symbols on them, while the Navy cruisers were part of Battlefleet Carthago, which had possibly come to assist collecting taxes. Lord Lancefire, you have come at the right time. And that Icarus conveyor can surely carry many corvettes. A Riser-Tech priest with biologist insignia appeared on the picked screen. Your fabricator on Forge Riser does have the same STC template, esteemed Margus. Surely you must have seen your shipyards working on the Odysseus-class fleet carrier? I asked Riley. The Margus blinked and checked something on his console. Oh. That's what it was. I admit I don't pay much attention to what the other Cladies are doing. These renegade Astartes refused to pay their gene tithe and even fired, and now destroyed an administratum ship. He commented astounded, as a merchant vessel of the Carthagan blew up under sustained fire from 3 strike cruisers. Well, now it was war. The traitors fired again on the other administratum trade vessels, and perhaps got lucky to hit something vital, as more and more exploded, curiously at the same rate as my plasma warheads teleported towards the enemy. I directed 30 corvettes to attack the Luft_Huron's battle barge, while mentally priming a plasma warhead for teleport. Just needed to get closer, which took some time with the lumbering fleet carrier. The traitors also had another Overlord-class battlecruiser like the Canticle, 4 Grand Cruisers and a Ramillies-class starfleet known as Canaan's Eye, which would be rather useful too. I just needed to make the ships run, and then capture them, without witnesses. I could also use my troops to quell the rebellion and conquer the starfleet, and claim it as war loot. This confiscation of assets was a rather common occurrence in the Imperium, but I didn't have enough space marines to win over the Astral_Claws fair and square. They had used the stolen gene seeds to mass-produce more Astartes, 20 times more over the Codex limit. Well, the extra Astartes should sell quite well to a certain collector of historical artifacts, plus nobody knew yet how many astral claws there really were. More warheads will be needed to obscure the forensic investigation that will follow. Playing with my gloved fingers on the command chair's armrest, I began doing just that, kidnapping company after company of illicit Astartes, while my ships created a wonderful smoke screen of torpedoes and missiles. Blood Angels. Ready 5 assault squads. Prepare to teleport on that starfleet. I need 1 fort, for my capital. I ordered with a light voice, like it would be a really easy fight. With only half a company of astral claws, instead of 5, and with a dozen warheads exploding in critical areas just as the torpedoes struck the thick fort armor, the starfleet fell quite easily indeed. Having complete superiority with the new Rosarios shields and Blackstone armor plates, my Blood Angels plowed through the traitors, just as a battalion of Katakans and 100 tech priests began teleporting to secure the fort. Just Huron's battle barge had 1,000 Astartes on it, which began vanishing into the Tesseract labyrinth as torpedoes began striking the barge in huge volleys. The vessel remained drifting and listing, and more Blood Angels and tech priests teleported on board to secure our prize. Seeing this, and deprived of their leader's commands, the other Astral Claws vessels began speeding away, fleeing the battle. However, the Astartes on board vanished mysteriously, as did the vessels once the warp rifts opened. Was I cheating like a Necron overlord? Sure I was. Even using the exact same technology, though without temporal manipulation or galactic range teleport, because I didn't enslave a Catan to my will. Not yet. The Navy cruisers caught courage seeing the battle won, and soon advanced to bombard the Astral Claws positions on the surface, supported by my destroyers and interceptors. Of course, there were 10,000 Astral Claws on Badab, which didn't manage to die to orbital bombardments, getting rescued by a mysterious force with dimensional tesseracts at his disposal. The serfs and the aspirants kept fighting of course, and so I began deploying my Katakan armored regiments and my air power, with the system corvettes providing pinpoint lance orbital support, or torpedo volleys on void-shielded fortresses. 1,000 corvettes had 20,000 torpedoes, which was more than enough to crush any fortified position. The Mechonicus vessels also began dropping Scutari and battle automata on the surface of Badab, forcing an even faster victory. I didn't wait to see the result, taking my cruisers and the destroyers and departing at speed towards Iblis. There was a Mars battlecruiser there I needed to capture. The conveyor will be needed to supply the ground troops, and had 1,000 torpedo corvettes for defense. It should be fine. Blood Angels, do not let anyone else board my starfleet, except the Forge Riser Magi. Same for the captured battle barge. Understood, Lord Pef. Good hunting for the traitors. Chaplain Delos replied from my starfleet. Installing warpless engines on the fort should be possible, as it was big enough. Perhaps too big. Same for the Grand Cruisers, which were just a bit too small, for the current Necron drive. Maybe after tinkering with the drive design a little. It wasn't my urgent concern though. Only confiscating as many ships I could, from this Badab_war. En route to Iblis, I make use of the tech priests I imported from Styges, basically a think tank of various Cludies and specialities to recover the lost STC patterns of the Macarius tank. A twin Volcano Lance template, with 2 small plasma reactors to supply both the engine and the weapons, and 2 heavy bolters for defense, seems to be the best we can make at a reasonable cost. It also has the new flare shield, which doubles the prodigious durability once more. Much cheaper would be a classic Vanquisher cannon variant, like those Lehman Russ tanks, with 3 autocannons for close defense. Could also use a heavy flamer, due to its Prometheum-based engine. We mark it down for the Astra Militarum and other PDF-style forces. The Guardsmen will surely love having these as their primary tanks. The next variant, one with a Gatling heavy bolter and 2 twin autocannons, would be hugely useful against light infantry. Not that much against anything else, and thus it's only there as a gift. The quad las cannon variant, with 3 twin multi-lasers gets my approval quite fast. Laser technology is cheap and readily available for any forge. I would pre-order 1 million of them, but they are still heavy tanks. Perhaps the entire Imperium of Man might produce 1,000,000 in 100 years. They would probably need to, considering what's coming. A power shield could be also installed, for extra resilience and cost. The next variant takes more work, because it uses the Riser plasma cannon and the Tigris atomantic reactor. There is enough energy for a flare shield and 3 triple multi-lasers, and this beast will keep working for a decade. Only the more advanced forges could build them, for Astartes and other elite units. This variant though, can face the worst in the galaxy, Titans or Necrons, even Chaos engines. Every forged world should have a few hundreds, just in case. The last variant has the Vulkite cannon from the glaive, with a frontal twin-las cannon and 2 quad multi-lasers on the sides. It is obscenely powerful against most units, and as expensive as the plasma variant. But it doesn't stand a chance against Titans or same-class enemies. It is the future though. Forgers working to build this complex beauty will need to struggle and grow, and Tyranid swarms would just melt in front of it. Only Mars can build it, or maybe Gaia, if their new planet has been developed enough. And then we arrive at Iblis, to find the place peaceful and rather confused at our arrival. This is the base of Battlefleet Maelstrom, but the war hasn't reached it yet. Seems I won't confiscate anything here, without the spark of a war. We refuel and rearm the torpedoes, for money. It's not that I'm poor, I'm not. My clan is damn rich and I rarely spend money for anything. I must be the strangest rogue trader ever. Anyway, with the loot of this campaign, I will have the largest fleet of any rogue trader dynasty, even those 10,000 years old. We already have battleships and battlecruisers, plus all the other ships. I tell Fenona to instruct her Astropath, and have Victor sell a dozen crippled Eldar cruisers on the market, via tax. It will make us twice as rich, and more importantly famous and well seen by the xenophobic Imperium. Plus, we will need lots of thrones to sponsor the emigration policy and subsidize childbirths. Those thrones will return as taxes once the population grows. Many times over, if my 7th implant isn't wrong by a few zeros. Using money to promote orc-style reproduction is funny, I know. They use teeth, but it pales in comparison with a real economy. This gives me an idea, and I instruct Varian to attempt to barter with our northern orc neighbors, those that I bombed into Bronze Age. He still has a decent fleet at Natale, and a growing coal and promethium industry. The orcs will move away from those northern planets, in exchange for a few derelict orc ships and a new target. We could gain 50 livable planets without a long fight to cleanse the worlds and ruin the ecosystems, and without spreading orc spores by the billions. And if those orcs try to loot the Novak_ dynasty, it will be fun to watch. Who knows, maybe the Necrons will deploy their Catan Crimson God and I might get a chance to steal him. I'm not sure what abilities the Crimson Catan Shard might have, but better send the orcs first and observe. The greenskins are not completely stupid, but promise of loot and a strong enemy always makes them jump head first. It is a very risky mission for my brother, but such is life for all rogue traders. You want an empire and riches, you have to take risks. He basically needs 50 orcish ships to lift off their entire population and escort them towards Dole, the Necron capital. Then run away and just observe from a great distance. My own fleet begins hunting the Magog sector, closer to the Maelstrom, and I do capture an orc cruiser and a pirate dictator _cruiser, a carrier type with 5 squadrons of Fury fighters on board, as well as bombers and landers. This pirate had 3 allied destroyers and a parasite stalwart _escort ship with melter charges on the prow ramp, for boarding. Like a 800-meter-long boarding torpedo, filled with ravenous and rapacious looters and criminals. This loot is already worth 70 billion thrones, and I have just begun. As long as we avoid the Hrud temporal event horizons, we should be fine. I'm certain Trazyn can deal with the Hrud just like he can with anyone else, but I lack his 60 million years of immortal studies. Geller fields are no protection against the Hrud abilities, but perhaps they could be used on the Tyranids or Chaos. And speaking of Chaos, 2 systems over we find an Orc Empire battling a Chaos fleet and winning. I hold my ships while we observe, and when the Orc boss teleports with his mks and knobs on the Chaos battle cruiser, I steal his ironclad battleship and all the escorts. 10 ships already captured, and they even have leaderless green crew. Perhaps gathering enough forces to drown the Necrons in a green sea won't be that hard. Once the Chaos Marines are butchered, I contact the Orc boss to tell him where he can find the next good fight. Somehow his Mks take over the infected Chaos ship and depart to fight a Necron god. They didn't bother to close the hangar doors, so I expect a lot of demons will provide entertainment till their final destination. What just happened, my lord? Chaplain Delos asks me, a bit confused and amazed. What do you mean, Astartes? I ask in fake innocence. You allowed the Orcs to capture that traitor vessel, and sent them to fight Necrons. He mutters in dismay. Not sure what is your point, Chaplain. I wondered in real confusion. He loses his train of thoughts for a moment before sighing in defeat. I keep forgetting you're a rogue trader. My bridge crew laughs heartily, glad we didn't have to risk our skins in a rather perilous boarding for no gain, as Chaos ships should always be pushed into a sun. Before we depart, we fire our lances at the surface, burning off most of the Orc infestation, looted cities and factories crawling with Gretchens and boys. The mushrooms will return, but without industry, ships or a war boss they won't be a danger for a millennium. Next 5 systems are empty, and then we stumble into a nest of pirates and some kind of criminal cartel, mining some rare minerals. 20 pirate destroyers, 5 Tempest_frigates and 2 light cruisers with macro cannons get vanished into my crystal labyrinth before we launch our invasion. Of course, my blood angels are kinda overkill for this type of enemies, but I'm here for loot and plunder. We also have thousands of combat servitors with adamantium shields and a battalion of void marines with volcano sentinels. A dozen various transport and courier vessels get boarded and captured, and we find almost 50 billion thrones and valuable jewelry, rare art items and lots of ancient weapon patterns and portable shields. On top of that, we liberate 1 million slaves, including captured nobles, administrators, and navigators, even some navy officers and another night pilot. I keep the navigators and the knight, as I can provide them with ships and a new knight suit, and the rest of the more important former slaves are loaded on my new fast_clipper to be deposited at Iblis for a small rescue fee. I don't even get a thanks from the entitled bastards, but then I didn't expect one. Can't carry 1 million people, but there is no need. This mining base and port is theirs, with few transport ships to keep trading. I don't need to take everything, and I don't. Pirates and criminals get executed or transformed into servitors, depending on what the locals claim. I won't sit in judgment too much. If there's a charge, death. If not, lobotomy and eternal servitude on my ships. For the next year we continue hunting the edge of the maelstrom, while the Badab War slowly changes focus to other rebellious chapters like the Mantis and the Executioners. We find 300 more destroyers, some 30 frigates and cruisers and an old Grand Cruiser transformed into a casino/space station. The local mob had 100 billion of illegal thrones in the vaults, which is of course shared by 1% with the crew. I also gain more control over the labyrinths, and line my captives in nice organized rows by race and height. The Astartes look great, like I have 1,000 decks of miniatures. Somehow, I begin to understand Trazin's fascination with collecting various decks. It is rather fulfilling.